All right, let's get right into it. You're here because your college teacher, Professor Uma Chowdhury, just dropped a major paper on corporate governance, and as her student, you want to absolutely nail the material. Well, you're in exactly the right place. Think of this explainer as your ultimate study cheat sheet. We're going to break down her complex research into clear, bite-sized insights, so by the end of this, you won't just get the paper. You'll be totally ready to dominate your next class discussion.
So the whole paper revolves around one incredibly fascinating subject, Bharat Electronics Limited, or BEL for short. Now, BEL isn't your run-of-the-mill company. It's India's only Navratna defense electronics enterprise. That means it sits right at this crazy intersection of national security, commercial profitability, and of course, intense public scrutiny. Trying to measure how a behemoth like this is governed, especially when it has to guard state secrets while somehow keeping global investors happy, is honestly a massive puzzle.
Here's our quick syllabus for today's explainer. 1. Decoding the paper. 2. 3 theoretical pillars. 3. Where BEL excels. 4. Critical gaps. And 5. Final recommendations. Let's jump in.
Part 1. Decoding the paper, Methodology and Scope. Let's look at how Professor Chowdhury actually built her case from the ground up.
What's really cool here is the sheer scope of her work. Published in the Shanlax International Journal of Management in April 2026, this isn't just some quick snapshot. Your professor used an exploratory analytical approach, diving into a longitudinal document analysis of BEL's official disclosures. We're talking 5 full fiscal years, from 2020-21 all the way to 2024-25. By looking at these trends over time, it really gives her findings a lot of academic weight. And her core mission? Well, it was to construct a governance quality assessment that is both objective and practical. See, in the public sector, it's super easy to just rely on self-reported claims, basically companies patting themselves on the back. She wanted to completely bypass that. So to stay completely objective, she benched BEL against 4 heavy-hitting international frameworks: the OECD principles, GRI standards, TCFD recommendations, and the IIRC framework. Basically, she held a domestic defense giant to the absolute highest global standards.
Moving right along to Part 2, 3 theoretical pillars, the analytical framework. This composite model is a major contribution of her paper and definitely something you'll want to bring up in class.
She brings together 3 distinct theories, starting with agency theory. In plain English, the owners, the principals, need to make absolutely sure the managers, the agents, aren't hiding things or just looking out for number 1. Agency theory is all about building rigorous monitoring structures to overcome those sneaky information advantages that managers naturally have. Next up is stakeholder theory, which was famously conceptualized by Freeman back in 1984. This one argues that governance can't just be about the shareholders, or, in BEL's case, just the government owners. It has to cast a wider net. It needs to include the armed forces actually using the equipment, the local communities around the factories, the employees, and really the broader public who care about national security. Finally, we get to stewardship theory. This one takes a much more optimistic vibe, assuming that corporate leaders actually want to do the right thing. It views them as responsible stewards of the institution's assets and reputation. So they're driven by a culture of ethics, rather than just chasing personal financial gain like rent seekers.
Now here's the golden nugget. It's how your professor maps these high-level abstract theories directly to what BOEL is actually doing on the ground. Check out how agency theory is handled by their 4 standing board committees that divide up oversight. Then stakeholder theory is brought to life through their decentralized right to information, or RTI system, that's managed by 16 different officers to guarantee public transparency. And stewardship theory, that's deeply embedded in their CERTI ethical framework, which stands for cooperation, ethics, responsibility, transparency, and integrity. And get this, it's even tied directly to employee performance reviews.
Part 3, where BEL excels. High marks on the report card. All right, we have the framework, so where does the company actually knock it out of the park?
73.8 out of 100. That's BEL's Care Ratings ESG score from October 2025. Now, why did Professor Chowdhury make a point to include this? Simple. It gives independent third-party validation. It proves that BEL's good governance isn't just talk. It's externally verified by a major credit rating agency. That score puts them in a highly competitive spot among their defense peers.
And here are the specific A-plus practices she highlights. The absolute standout is that first one. Their vigilance department, the team fighting corruption, is literally ISO 9001:2015 certified. That means their anti-corruption efforts are systematically audited and verified, which is incredibly rare for a Navratna enterprise. Plus, they were early adopters of multi-capital integrated reporting way back in 2021, and they even use independent retired civil servants to monitor their procurement contracts through integrity packs.
But it's not all perfect. Part 4, Critical Gaps, needs improvement. This is where the paper turns a critical eye, identifying the major roadblocks keeping BEL from hitting true global best practices.
First up, there's a massive, glaring gap in their environmental tracking. BEL measures Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, which is basically their direct fuel use and purchased electricity. But they are totally missing Scope 3. Now, Scope 3 covers the upstream supply chain, component procurement, and the end-of-life disposal of their products. In defense electronics, Scope 3 is structurally going to be the absolute biggest chunk of their carbon footprint. So, by ignoring it, their current net zero claims are, frankly, pretty incomplete. Then there's this concept called double materiality. Definitely remember this term. Right now, BEL only looks at financial materiality, meaning they ask, how do climate and social issues affect our bottom line? But double materiality requires you to also look in the mirror and measure the reverse. How do the company's operations impact the outside world, like local ecosystems or communities? BEL is missing that second, crucial half of the equation entirely.
This really illustrates the remaining gaps when you stack them against those global standards we mentioned earlier. Look at the TCFD standard. BEL lacks any climate risk scenario analysis. They aren't stress testing their business model against 1.5-degree or 2-degree warming scenarios at all. Under GRI standards, there's no standalone sustainability report. And finally, looking at ESG integration, there's zero explicit evidence that executive bonuses are actually tied to hitting environmental, social, and governance targets. Which brings us to Part 5, Final Recommendations, Extra Credit Roadmap. A great academic paper doesn't just complain, it offers solutions. Let's look at the exact roadmap your professor laid out.
Seriously, if you're taking notes for class, screenshot this. Her recommendations are laser-focused. 1. Adopt the TCFD framework by fiscal year 2025-26. That's a must to satisfy international institutional investors. 2. Publish a standalone GRI-aligned sustainability report that actually uses that double materiality concept. 3. Commission a comprehensive Scope 3 emissions baseline assessment, like yesterday. And 4. Formally link executive KPIs to ESG outcomes, so the leadership finally has a real financial stake in sustainability.
But she goes beyond just annual reports. She's calling for real structural changes. She argues BEL needs to establish a dedicated ESG governance office that reports directly to the board to centralize this whole strategy. On top of that, they should launch a live public ESG performance dashboard on their website. It's all about shifting accountability from some dusty once-a-year document into true real-time transparency. So that brings us to the big question. Your professor laid out the ultimate playbook. We know BEL has the capacity for this. I mean, their ISO-certified vigilance proves they can handle rigorous oversight. But the question you really need to take into your next seminar is this. Will BEL actually implement these global best practices to bridge the gap? Or will the inherent bureaucracy of being a state-owned defense enterprise just hold them back? It's a fantastic tension to think about. You're completely equipped to debate this now. Go crush that class!